Hi, and welcome to a special Supreme Court episode of Ends Division. We're all in here, and I'm joined with Professor Elizabeth Price Foley. She's a professor of law at Florida International University, and she's the author of numerous books, including The Tea Party, Three Principles, which is terrific. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hi, Glenn. Great to be with you again.
So, a while back, Norm Ornstein had a piece in The Atlantic where he proposed term limits for the Supreme Court, and he got a certain amount of flack for this. Some people questioned the timing of the piece, and other people questioned his suggestion that the current Supreme Court would have upheld segregated schools. Aside from that, on the larger question, does he have a point? I mean, Supreme Court justices are living a long time. Are they staying on too long? Should we limit them?
Well, I guess my response to that would be sort of too long for what? Term limits are designed, I guess, to infuse our political process with sort of fresh blood, to make sure that you don't elect politicians who sort of march off to Washington and spend, the next several decades sort of growing out of touch with the people. So they're designed to make sure that certain officers of the government stay in touch with majoritarian preferences. And I guess my response is, is that really what you want for the Supreme Court of the United States? Do you really want your Supreme Court justices to kind of, have to stick their finger up in the air and sort of see which way the political winds are blowing? I certainly don't want. That's not what I think the role of judges is supposed to be. Judges are supposed to, interpret the law the way it's written, including the Constitution, and what current majoritarian preferences are shouldn't affect that interpretive exercise. So, I think this is just another attempt by the political left to sort of politicize this court, to get it to tilt to the left ideologically, and I don't think that is really what Americans want.
Do you think this is really just part of this sort of ongoing lefty campaign in the op-eds and everywhere to get Justice Ginsburg to step down so that Obama can appoint her successor before the Republicans take the Senate back?
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of nefarious. The poor old Justice Ginsburg, how old is she now? She's like 81, I think, and she's, had some health problems. I mean, Breyer is not far behind her. I think he's mid-70s, maybe 75, 76. But they're putting all these pressure on these sort of standard bearers for progressivism on the court right now. And certainly Ginsburg and Breyer would be probably the best standard bearers for progressivism on the court right now. And they want him to step down while, President Obama is president, so that he can appoint someone who is equally progressive, but who's going to live longer and be on the court longer, who can, carry the torch of progressivism longer. So, I mean, when I look at the Ornstein proposal for term limits and, this pressure for Ginsburg, or maybe Breyer even, to step down, I see the same theme, which is, ways that the progressives are dreaming up to, long term at least, tilt the ideology of the court to the left.
Yeah, well, if we're just going to politicize the court anyway, why don't we go whole hog and just elect Supreme Court justices? You can elect people for a single 18-year term, cut out the president, cut out the Senate, make it a nationwide campaign. Do you think if we did that, if we had an elected Supreme Court, would it be more liberal or more conservative or just different?
Well, I mean, we certainly could do it, I guess. I mean, again, just like with term limits, you would have to have a constitutional amendment to do it. But let's assume that's what we wanted, and we enact a constitutional amendment. We start electing Supreme Court judges. What do we get out of it? Well, we get politicians, number one. That shouldn't be a surprise. They would operate in the same sort of political environment that all politicians operate in today, which is this environment of political correctness. If you run for public office today, there's certain things you stay away from. You can't talk about. And if you are, you're publicly sort of shamed by the political left. So we would expect Supreme Court justices would operate in that same highly politicized, politically correct environment. Then the other thing I think we'd get out of it would be, different credentials for who sits on the court. Right now, when we have Senate confirmation of our Supreme Court justice nominees, They really care about and look at, the academic credentials of the nominee, the life experience, the legal experience of the nominee. They really want to know if this person understands the law and is good at the law. But if we start electing justices, what we're going to get is, people who have charisma or people who are good at public speaking and not necessarily good at the law. So if that's what we want, that's what we're going to get.
Yeah, well, speaking as an Ivy Leaguer myself, and of course that goes for you too, I don't want to knock Harvard and Yale, but on the other hand, the Supreme Court currently is very heavily dominated by the Ivy League. In fact, they're all, if not Ivy League, graduates of the very, very top law schools. So, there's an argument that maybe that's a little narrow. And we do have state Supreme Courts that are elected, some of which are just fine. And indeed, there's some empirical research that says that elected state Supreme Courts are sometimes better at protecting rights that are more valued by the populace at large, such as the right to arms, for example. So it's not so clear, to me at least, that it's a deadweight loss, because I look out there, and you probably know what I'm talking about, I look at the world of law professors, and I see some politicians, and you and I could probably agree on some of the names, but there are probably 900 law professors out there who are politically campaigning for a Supreme Court seat right now. Now, that's a real fool's errand, because at most one of them will, and indeed one of the ones who's tried the hardest over my lifetime is almost certain to have wasted his entire life doing it. But they do try, and certainly, being nominated to the Supreme Court, being confirmed at the Supreme Court, you're also it's political, and you're subjected to litmus tests, and you can't have said anything too controversial. So would it be that much worse to force somebody to go out and talk to the American people and tell them what they're going to do on the Supreme Court and why they think things are important?
Well, I don't think it's a pure loss, but I think you just get different characteristics. And, I suppose it depends on, how politicized you really want the court to be. I mean, undoubtedly electing the Supreme Court is going to increase the politicization and not decrease it. The polling that I've seen where you see the respect numbers of the Supreme Court going down, down, down since the 1960s to a historic low today, I think is driven by the public's perception that the court is becoming too ideological, too political in interpreting the laws, and in particular the Constitution. So I agree that, you might get justices who are more overt about their ideological preferences before they sit on the court, whereas now, if you sit through a Senate judiciary hearing trying to get them to say anything substantive, is like pulling teeth. They're trying to avoid, all the 800-pound gorillas in the room because they don't, want to, trigger the ire of anyone sitting on that committee. So it's all a big hide.
Yeah, you're always supposed to say your favorite justice is John Marshall Harlan. And the reason you're supposed to pick Harlan as your favorite justice is that, number one, he was, very highly credentialed, very smart lawyer. But number two, he got off the court right before Roe v. Wade was decided, so you don't have to take any sides on that. The confirmation process is kind of kabuki now. I'm not necessarily proposing an elected Supreme Court, but, I do think that the more people want to politicize the court in other ways, the weaker the argument against politicizing the court honestly. And saying, if it's going to be a political body, let's make it a real political body.
Right. I mean, you really have two options at this point where the court is sort of at its all-time low in terms of respect. You either go all out and sort of overtly politicize it and accept the consequences, positive and negative, that come with that, or you try to depoliticize it somehow, which is actually, I think, what the framers of the Constitution were trying to do when they set it, Article 3 up the way they did with lifetime tenure and presidential appointment with the Senate confirmation. So we can either say that
right.
just hasn't worked and scrap it, or try to somehow re-energize that original vision.
Well, exit question. If Obama got to choose a justice, what would that justice be like? Do you have any names, any suggestions, an outline? Elizabeth Warren?
Well,
I don't know.
Oh gosh, let's hope not. Maybe. You look at who he's appointed so far. He's appointed Kagan and Sotomayor, two women, two sort of overtly liberal progressive. That's not a surprise. I mean, presidents always try to put someone on the court who reflect their own ideology. I'm not going to condemn him for that. But he also seems to be a president that puts a high premium on sort of racial identity, gender politics. So I would expect that trend would continue. My guess is he feels like he's sort of satisfied the part of his political base by appointing two women already, so he might feel a little more free to actually appoint a man to the court now, shockingly enough. And I think that he's going to feel a lot of pressure to put an African American on the court to sort of balance out Clarence Thomas, or perhaps an Asian American on the court. And if that's his game, then, somebody maybe like Paul Watford out on the Ninth Circuit, who actually, I think, clerked for Ginsburg. Maybe someone like Eric Holder's name has been floated around. I'd like to see that confirmation here. Or maybe Harold Coe, radical like that. Cass Sunstein.
Yeah, Coe's certainly been campaigning. Sunstein's probably a little too old now. Hey, Van Jones has a law degree. So who knows?
Then we're really in trouble. I don't think Van Jones would make it out of the Senate Judiciary Committee. If not, if things go the way they look like they're going to go in 2014 with the Senate.
Well, and hence trying to get Ginsburg out. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks very much, Clint. It's always a pleasure to see you.
That's Elizabeth Price Foley. She's professor of law at Florida International University and author of numerous well-received books, including most recently The Tea Party, 3 Principles. And thanks to all of you for joining us, too. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, have fun on the internet. Thanks.